So recently I went to a wedding and they not only contracted a professional photographer, but they also contacted what they called a content creator. And she was there to go ahead and make videos of the wedding and compile them and do kind of like you would a YouTube video, I guess. But anyway, guess what she was using? Yeah, not one, but two Apple iPhones. And you know, of course, she had the special tripods and special handheld adapters with microphones on it and things like that. But the camera she used was the Apple iPhone. So that's how common it is becoming for professionals to take shots with these phones. And you know, there are even movie pictures that you might see, you know, lower budget movie pictures, that a lot of the scenes are shot with a phone camera. So they really are becoming good. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the adjustments that you can use to make your pictures a little bit better when you're taking photos with your phone. So the first thing I do want to do, I want to point out that this video is done using an Apple iPhone. So if you have a Google Pixel or an Android based or something like that, it's probably going to look a little different. You may have to look at other videos to find the particular settings and how to get to them on your phone. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and grab your phone and go to the camera app and open that up. And at the top of the app, you'll see a little arrow up there, and go ahead and press that, and that will bring up some settings at the bottom. And those are going to be the most common settings that we're going to use. So the first setting, and you can do this up at the top also, is going to be the flash. And the flash on the phone, I go ahead most of the time and leave it in auto. It's probably, to me, it's probably the least effective of the phone camera, you know, uses that you have. The flash really isn't very good. So if you're taking low light shots and you're having to use the flash, the pictures probably aren't going to come out real good. But that is where you use it to turn the flash on or off, or just leave it in auto. Okay, the second setting is the night mode. And the night mode, pretty much it's going to be auto or on. And what it'll do is, there are a lot of times in low light situations that you need to go ahead and adjust that shutter speed, but you can't manually adjust it. You can auto adjust it, and it will allow for more lower light picture taking. But there may be times that you want to turn that off. And we'll get into that a little later in the video, that there are times that the camera is going to misinterpret the lighting that you're trying to take advantage of. So there may be a time that you want to turn that nighttime photography, you may want to turn that off so you can get the shot or the composition that you want to get. Okay, this next one is called live mode. And live mode is really neat to capture any kind of sports event, something that, you know, where you're taking a picture of something moving. The live mode is really, really good. The problem or the downfall to the live mode is it's like taking a mini video or a burst of, you know, 4 or 5 frames at a time, and it takes up a lot of digital space. So if you're wanting to do something with this photo, you know, you may have to take, and like if you're going to send it out to friends, you know, you can't send out a lot of them at the same time because they take up a lot of space. So you may have to take and go through the frames and figure out which one you want, and then separate that to take it out. But it is a really great feature. And a lot of times you'll catch where somebody will be blinking or something like that in a group photo. And if you take it in live mode, you can go ahead and just move that a frame or two and hopefully get them to where they're not blinking or moving in whatever way they were. So using that live mode is a good thing, but I leave mine off for everyday photos. Now, if I'm shooting at a sporting event, you know, grandkids t-ball, something like that, I turn that live mode on. All right, this next one is your filters or your photographic styles. And this is kind of cool if you're wanting to, add a filter to your picture to help your story taking. If you want it to be more vibrant, if you want it to be cool, if you want it to be warm. And the other thing about these is if you look at the bottom, you can go ahead and manually adjust those or fine tune those, to how you want it to look. But it's a really good way of applying a filter to your photos to tell a story if you don't want to do anything in post or in, after you take the picture. If you're not using any kind of post editing software, this is a way to really capture a photo the way you want it to look in the final product. All right, and this next one is aspect ratio. Now this depends on what you're wanting to do with the photo. A lot of social media posts now, their format is more of a square format. So you may want to take the photos in square. Personally, I like to take them in a 4x3 because that seems to be, because a lot of times I'm taking pictures of people and things like that. And the 4x3 kind of makes it a little easier to crop down to a square if I want to post it on social media. And most social media platforms, if you upload a 4x3, they'll just automatically crop it down a little bit. If you take it in a 16:9, sometimes what it'll do is it will take the image and it'll cut so much of it off that it zooms out or zooms in a little too much. And the 16:9 is great for taking when you're wanting to take in a lot of information. Sporting events, where you're wanting to, take in, more of the field and things like that, and capture a landscape. Landscape is where I use that 16:9 a lot. Or what you can see, like you see here, this is at a national park we went to here recently, and I took some in the 4x3 and I took some in the 16:9. Now the 16:9 for a YouTube video is the aspect ratio that you use. Whereas if I'm going to post it on, say, Instagram or Facebook, it's going to take the square format, or where I can use the 4x3. So it just depends on what you're wanting to do with it. If you're wanting to capture more information, I'd suggest going to the 16:9. If you're wanting it for just everyday camera shots, probably 4x3 or square. Now this next one is exposure. And exposure is the one that you will probably use more often than most of the other settings. Okay? So here's a good example, again, at that wedding I was at, where they had an outdoor covered chapel, and it was just beautiful, but the camera wanted to try to balance out everything. So it took and it exposed the skyline correctly, but the inside of the chapel was very dark. So here's a picture that I took with it just automatically, and then I went ahead and adjusted, just for this photo, I adjusted the exposure so that, the pews and the lighting of the pews showed up a little better. And you can see the difference there. And you can tell in the one that I manually adjusted, the skyline is a little blown out. And I had to do that so that I could get some more color into where the pews and the people were going to be sitting. And of course, I didn't take photos during the wedding. That's kind of bad form. They have professional photographers do that. But I just wanted to use that as a reference. So there's two-way on my iPhone. There are two ways to adjust the exposure. Now you can adjust it shot by shot by going ahead and just touching the screen, and that'll, autofocus, auto expose what you're wanting, whatever you touch on the screen, and then sliding your finger up and down to go ahead and adjust the exposure for just that shot. And then when you go to take the next shot, it'll go back to auto. Now, if you want to adjust, if you're like, say you're in that outdoor chapel pew and you were going to take a lot of pictures, you would go ahead and pull it up at the bottom here, and you would go ahead and adjust it to where you wanted it and leave it there. And as you can see up here on top, it'll stay there, you know, until you go ahead and adjust it or put it back to auto. So that's a real handy feature, and that's the one that you probably will use, because when you sit down to take a group of photos, you know, you may want to look at that exposure and play with that a little bit before you start taking the photos, you know, to make sure that the camera setting is right for the pictures that you're wanting to take. Okay, and the last one over here is the timer. And the timer is very handy if you're taking, you know, self-portraits, or you're wanting to take a picture of you in the background of something. You know, you can set that timer for 10 or 15 or 30 seconds and then go out in front of the camera and have the picture taken. The other thing that it's handy for is, you know, just for a steady hand. If you're wanting to capture some pictures, sometimes using your thumb to press that shutter button, where your thumb has got to come around, can be not the handiest position in the world, and you do a little shaking because you're trying to hold the camera with one hand while you're doing something with the other. So you can go ahead and set that timer for, say, 3 seconds, so you can press the shutter, and that gives you 3 seconds to move your hand around and get steady and take the picture. And as a note, I know a lot of cameras are set up so that the picture can be taken with the up and down volume buttons. And that's a little easier sometimes than reaching around and trying to hit that shutter button on the screen. Is depending on how you're holding your phone, you can just use the volume buttons. So go ahead and play around with your phone and figure out what you can do and get more comfortable with these settings and adjustments so that you can take better pictures. And if this video's helped you, I'd appreciate it if you reach down, hit that like button, and watch this video next.